Hi, I'm Mark Lawson, president of Morningstar Music Publishers, and we are joined today by Michael Burkhardt, well-known composer and organist and music educator. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the collections that he has done for beginning ringers and could be used with adults or with children. So Michael, welcome. Glad that you're here.
Nice to join you, and thanks for the opportunity to speak about the materials and the resources for ringers.
Well, this time of year, many of us are starting children's choirs or we're starting with adult choirs, bringing in new ringers. That's always one of the hardest things to do is to incorporate new ringers or to begin a children's group. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity just to explore how you go about this because you've done it for a number of years and then these resources kind of grew out of what you do. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I agree. Every time we start a new season, it's a challenge, and we want our ringers to be successful that very first rehearsal, so they'll want to come back. So the kinds of things I look for in repertoire and for that initial gathering that we have, first of all, that the piece might only focus on fundamental techniques of ringing and damping. And so often we get so excited about all the special techniques that we're not good at particularly damping. And so to start with that, then maybe have one or two of the special techniques for stopped or rung sounds, like a shake or a march that occurs maybe infrequently, but that you can isolate within the composition. I think that's a great way to start. I also look for pieces that have repetition in them. My preferred is exact repetition or with little variation because in that first rehearsal or with beginning groups, it's hard for them to change the rhythm in a repetition or certain melodic patterns. And I think it's best to stay with the one that was established at the beginning. I also think a single meter for an initial composition and preferably in duple, 4/4 or 2/4. I found with my children and with my adults, but research also backs it up that most of us have more challenges in ringing things in groups of three as opposed to ringing things in groups of two or four. And so I would look for that. And I would look for rhythms that have core rhythmic values in them. Quarter notes or quarter rest, half notes and whole notes, and probably paired eighth notes. It's easier to read a pair of eighth notes than to have a dotted rhythm in an initial piece. Of course, more advanced ringers would ring that right away, but for an initial experience, that's a more complex gesture for people to do. I also look for something that I think could be the hook. And the hook might be a certain melodic idea, or it might be a certain rhythm, or it might be a certain recurring harmony, something that the ringers will want to do again, that will engage them right away from the beginning. I think the piece does not need to be long. I'd rather choose a short piece and do it really well than an extended piece and kind of muddle through it, so to
I
speak.
think having
Um,
success with something is important. Yeah.
And that would be my last comment. Immediate success so that they could go home humming it or moving and ringing it in their person, and maybe even in certain cases, come back to ring it on Sunday morning um, for kind of a kickoff Sunday. I know some people do something called a rally Sunday or a back to fall season church Sunday. And it's nice to have something that all of the music groups might be able to share at that initial fall
Mhm,
experience.
mhm. Well, why don't I share my screen and why don't we look at some of these publications that you've provided that I think actually incorporate these techniques. Um, they're all on our website and they're easy to find. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. But let me share first of all. And the first one I've got up here is Ringing Throughout the Church Year. You want to talk about that one?
Okay. Well, I know that we're going to be looking at about five different collections, so I might do just an initial forward to all of them. That in each of the collections, everything is reproducible, and that I think that's been an important part for us because as our budgets have been getting cut, to be able to get nine pieces that we can reproduce in a collection is very helpful. for our program. In addition to that, in each of these collections we're going to talk about, there's going to be a summary for the director or the instructor of the techniques that are used, of rhythmic values, of meter, expressive qualities, form, learning opportunities, and core rhythm patterns that can assist the director or the leader in preparing the score for himself or herself, as well as in how to go about teaching the piece of music.
And they're often
So
found right before the piece or in the beginning. So for
there you
example,
go. In this particular collection, there is a piece for each season of the church year, as well as some general pieces. But each of the pieces in this case were composed to help ringers focus on a particular technique or aspect of musicianship within a single piece of music. Some of the pieces contain optional hand chime parts, which could be played by more experienced ringers who need a challenge within your group, or they might even be played by a handbell hand chime ensemble who would join the main handbell ensemble and kind of have a combined group playing together. In this particular collection, 4 of the pieces are based on familiar hymn tunes, and 5 pieces are original compositions. So it's a useful collection for throughout the year. The levels, according to the levels that have been established by AGHR and now our new Handbell Musicians of America group, range from easy to level 2, but it would be an easy level 2.
I'm going to have to reduce this down just a little because of the way my screen is working all of a sudden. So the next one is Sing and Ring, I believe.
Yeah, of the collections we're taking a look at today, this is probably the one that I would use right towards the beginning of working with people who have never rung before, particularly children who have never rung before. The intent of the collection was to provide materials for initial experiences in ringing chordal accompaniments to familiar melodies, and to understand maybe the function of 3 principal chords that we commonly associate with tonal music: the 1 chord, the 5 chord or the 5/7 chord, and the 4 chord. And then to focus on reading traditional music notation on a grand staff. In addition to those opportunities, there are exercises for identifying space and line, and then reading rhythms on those, and simple exercises that could become a part of your regular warm-up, depending on the group that you work with. There are 6 handbell chordal accompaniment arrangements for well-known folk songs, and they're for 2 and 3 octave ensembles. And as you see Mark scrolling through all of this stuff, lots of pedagogical materials that can be used and reproduced for your singers. And I think the collection is ideal for children, especially with little or no ringing experience. And so I often start using this collection with my first group of 2nd and 3rd graders who might be ringing for the first time. And the ideal range for those 1st and 2nd graders could be 2 octaves or extending up for 3 octaves, but only at the top end. The bells and the chimes are too cumbersome below the G of the bass clef that is on the 4th space there. So
Yes,
those are just some thoughts.
I used this a lot last year with the children's group I was conducting, and we actually played everything up an octave so that the bells were much smaller, and then they could actually handle it easier because I had such small children. So that's one idea, is to just take everything and play it an octave higher than written.
And that would suppose that you have the additional bells of,
Yes, yes.
octaves. But I think that's a great suggestion. In particular, the arrangements for 3 octaves, that would be great if you have the additional octaves above to ring. So that's what I know about that. I see the hymns for handbells that you've just pulled up on the screen. It's really a collection of what I would call flexible hymn settings. And those hymn settings take two forms. Some of them are actually hymn accompaniments, and the other ones are actually settings that could be done without instruments or singers. The pieces are arranged sequentially in terms of difficulty. As we look at the arrangements for the hymn accompaniments, there are five of them. Start simply with random ringing accompaniments, moving to ostinato accompaniments that you see before you right now on the screen, and then moving to repeated pattern or repeated chord progressions as accompaniments. And then finally, ending up with a composition in which a single rhythm is used for the chordal accompaniment all the way throughout. The settings take a variety of arrangement compositional styles. Some of them in which you would just simply play the melody. For others, you simply play the accompaniment. For some of them, you will simply play a fanfare based on some idea of the piece that is being shared. So I would use this throughout the year, and it kind of makes a nice companion to when your bell choir is ringing a soul, an anthem bell piece or an anthem chime piece, to be able to have them play something else in the service. So they're not just always playing their piece, but that they're involved and they're integral to the worship life of the liturgy or what is going on in the particular service in which they are playing.
I've used the next two collections quite a bit with my group. There's two sets of these handbell processions, and I've used them with both adults and children. Talking about this.
I would start the year with any of these. The two collections are based on the concept of layering patterns. And in some cases, it's just a single set of layered patterns. In some other instances, it's several sets of layered patterns. The first collection that you had up and we saw the cover, which now we're seeing the contents, are pieces that I would start with if you had never done a handbell processional before. They are easier than the second set collection that we would look at. And in this particular collection, a single set of patterns normally alternates with, it could be a keyboard part or something different. And you can see here for this first piece, for the processional in F, we start simply with the steady beat pulse, moving to a first ostinato for pattern 2. And then as you go on, you'll see different patterns being layered on top of it. It creates a wonderful effect, and it kind of blossoms when all of the patterns are put together. This would be what the handbell ringers might see if they had experience reading, on the staff already. If I was working with a group in which this might be a first experience, I would use what you're rolling up on the screen right now.
Where just turn sideways,
pattern,
I can't quite.
Yes, you turn this way to play and you ring this way. But it's a complete page with a single pattern on it, in which you give that to the child or children responsible for that pattern, and it helps them track through the piece. After they use it a couple times, they won't be looking at it anymore, but it's a great introduction to music reading and some of the symbols that they'll find in other pieces. My tradition for this is never to start the procession until all the parts are ringing together at the back of the sanctuary or from wherever you will enter. And I try to always place the base and the foundational pulse either in the middle of the group or at the head of the group to keep it going. If it's at the back of the group, it doesn't always carry through to the front of the group, and you might end up with a wonderful piece of chants music in two different tempi.
Well, let me show
that's the first collection. The second collection is more complex in that the patterns are more challenging, and you end up having to create some kind of symbolism for saying, okay, we're going to do this first set of layering. Now we're going to do another set, and now we're going to do another set. But what's really fun about it is that your ringers start really paying attention to the director because they have no choice, because each of the sections that are started can be repeated as much as you need. The piece we're looking at right now has a section for handbells. And if you keep on scrolling down there, Mark, I think we will see, is there another page there?
Changes to a different piece.
Okay, so in some of them, you'll see this section is for hand chimes, this section is for bells, and other times it might just be for the same ensemble. So I think, again, like the hymns for handbells, these processionals make a great companion to an anthem piece that you might be ringing in worship. And I don't think they always have to be used as the processional to get into the building or as a recessional to get out of the building. In some traditions, when the gospel reading is read, it is often processed into the midst of the congregation. And I think that is a wonderful way to use one of these processionals. I think also sometimes to make the processional or the recessional maybe as a fanfare to a hymn that you're going to sing that is in the same key. And maybe your bells are surrounding the congregation or the assembly. And we start with all the patterns, and gradually those patterns make way for perhaps a keyboard instrument or other instruments introducing the melody of a hymn, and then they go into singing it. And you might use the recessional music as a coda to the hymn that is just sung.
Well, let me show people real quickly how to find these on the website. If you go to our website and you go to the handbell area, the easiest way, there's several ways to do it, but this is the easiest way to go to handbells, click that area, and then simply go down here to the composer arranger, and you will find Michael right here. And then this will pull up all the handbell pieces that he has wonderfully provided for us. I always like to click the all so I see everything. And then it will load up all the handbell pieces of Michael's, and you can easily find these collections spread through on these other pages. So that's the quickest way to find it, and you'll be able to see the previews that I showed earlier, and it's just an easy way to locate this material. So you had mentioned, just in closing, Michael, you had mentioned that you use these for hearts, hands, and voices. There's also a section in the website under the children's section in which you can get to the hearts, hands, and voices materials, all of them. Just say a word about hearts, hands, and voices.
Well, we are in our 15th year. We started it as a faith adventure here in Southeast Michigan to provide opportunities for children of all different backgrounds to come together in a safe environment to grow spiritually and musically. At first, when we initially started out, we were supported by a geographical region of the ELCA and an area church. And since our inception, we are now a nonprofit organization welcoming all children. We meet throughout the school year for an hour and a half every Monday evening, where we have now a parental community as well as the children's community. About 30 children or so will participate in that program during the academic year. And during the summer, we do an extensive, intensive camp experience, which actually is going to start next week, Monday, on Sunday with the teachers. The goal being to provide experiences for children who would not necessarily get them, whether they are a member of a church or not. A lot of our children don't have a church home, and some of them do, but there's no opportunity for them to grow with their music gifts because of the size of their particular congregation or parish. And so our goal is to give them opportunities. We do 2 programs during the academic year that don't conflict with anybody's worship time. And then we encourage that whatever the children have learned in the experience on Monday nights during the academic year, that they take that back to their home congregation and share it with them as either a small ensemble or as a soloist, perhaps. And we're excited about 500 children have come through the program so far.
Well, that's wonderful.
So,
And we really greatly appreciate you sharing the materials that come out of that experience for others. So thank you so much for joining us. And we wish everyone who's watching this a good start to the new year. So thank you, Michael.
Oh, could I make one comment?
Sure.
It's just that sometimes we see the word easy on a piece of music and we think it's for beginners. And sometimes easy might be just the right thing for us or even intermediate because we can do it well. And I think sometimes let's do things really well so that we can then move on to other things. So I would encourage all of us to remember that and enjoy whatever is before us.
That's
Thank you
great.
for letting me
That's
share.
great. You're welcome. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you joining us.
You're welcome.
All
Have a
right.
good
Take
one.
care.